Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and today we'd like to talk to you about the art of being present. In metaphysical philosophy, we talk a lot about the importance of living in the now, being in the present moment, and for so many of us, we spend a lot of our thoughts, a lot of our time, and a lot of our thinking, and a great deal of our life in either the past or the future. We're thinking about things that happened, things that took place yesterday, last year, or at some other point in time, and we think about the things that we have to do in the next 10 minutes or the next 5 days or the next 5 years. But we need to be aware of the present moment, and we need to stress within our thinking and within our thought process the art of being present. We all need to work on that, don't we, Iris?
Yes, indeed we do. And we think of all the things that we need to do. We think of as you said, the past, the future, everything. But if we keep our consciousness in present time, life is so much easier, and everything and our work goes so much better, and we don't have the tiredness at the end of the day that we do when we don't keep our consciousness in present time throughout the day.
That's a real important issue. I think we spend a lot of our energy in the past and in the future, don't we?
Yes. Well, of course, everything is energy, as you always say. Everything is energy and vibration. And so we can use that energy, and we have a certain amount of energy constant. So we can use it in various ways, and too often we squander that energy. And when we use it for keeping our consciousness in the now, in present time, then the energy is not wasted, and then our own energy level is higher, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when we do that, when we're really focusing on the present moment, and when we're aware of the circumstances and situations and the people around us, very important to think about the people around us, because so often we are surrounded by people, but we know sociologists and psychologists, counselors tell us that people are so lonely, and yet we're surrounded by people. Now, of course, there are people who are alone and are not lonely, and there are people who are alone and who are lonely. But for most of us, we spend our lives in the world surrounded by people, either at work or at the grocery store or school or in the neighborhood, and yet we're isolated because of the fact that we don't recognize the people around us as persons. And usually that has to do with the fact that we're not in the present time, we're not in the now, we're not focused on where we are. An example that I give so often is the waiter or the waitress in the restaurant, and how many of us have had a waiter or waitress come up who almost always very kindly introduces themselves and says, "I'm John," or "I'm Mary, and I'm here to serve you, and could I bring you something to drink?" And we order our drinks, and they come back, and we order our meal, and then we need something, and then we look up for the waiter or waitress. We don't know whether it was a man, a woman, whether they were young or old. We haven't even seen them as people. And then, of course, in our personal lives, at home and at work and in dialogue with our friends and acquaintances, so often as people are talking to us, we're thinking about something else, and so we're not present with them in the moment, and we're really not occupying the same space or the same time, and that takes a lot from us, and it takes a lot from our relationship and the relationships that could develop, and it also says a lot to us about how we value other people.
Yes, I think that's true with children. So often parents just ignore their children's presence, and when the children are talking, they half listen, and the child feels disenfranchised because they feel they realize the parent is not giving them their full attention, and the children blossom and grow more fully if they are given direct attention. And a lot of people call it quality time, and they call it a lot of different things, but it's simply giving the child the attention of the parent when they are present, and when they are conversing, and when they're trying to get the parent's attention, and it pays great dividends.
Absolutely. And the other one, you were speaking about young people, we so often neglect being present with the young, listening to them and interacting with them, but we do the same with older people. Yes. And of course, as we get older, we see young people doing that, but this discounting of the young and the old, and being able to better relate to our contemporaries or better relate to those around us who are closer to our own ages, is sometimes a tendency that we have. And I'm thinking now of you and I spend a lot of time talking to people who are ill or older, and some time in nursing homes and hospitals. And how often in a hospital, for instance, or a nursing home, when 2 or 3 visitors are present, they'll speak among themselves and neglect the person that's there, although that person is physically with them, obviously in the experience. The individuals are carrying on their conversation, and life goes on at the exclusion of this other person.
Yes, and that's not only rude, but it's disconcerting for the person who is excluded, and particularly for someone who's ill. It's more than disconcerting, and actually it's very rude too. But we often forget that everyone deserves full attention when we're in their presence, if we are carrying on a conversation. And that's true. That's why people hold, a minister will hold the interest of the congregation because they're looking at the congregation and the congregation is listening. But sometimes the congregation might, some people might have their mind wander. But that's true in every area of life. And so the people who do allow their minds to wander are really cutting themselves short, because then they're not learning what they might learn, whether it's a TV show, or if it's worth turning on, then it's worth listening to, or whatever it is that we're putting our attention to. And it becomes a habit, doesn't it?
It becomes a habit, and it becomes a habit to be preoccupied, and it becomes a habit to be disengaged. And the real issue here that we're talking about is when we are not present, when we're not present in the moment with other people, then we're really, as we say so often, in an unconscious or semi-conscious state. We're not even in the conscious moment, because as we go into the past, the past has already happened, and the future, most of what we're thinking and are concerned about, as philosophers have said, and others, isn't going to come to pass anyway. I mean, we worry about so many things, and if we could be in that present moment, and if we could give the attention that is deserved to those around us, one of the simple things is making eye contact. And I'm kind of amazed at the number of people that we talk with every day who never make eye contact. And of course, we know from a psychological standpoint that has certain implications, and we're not going to get into that aspect of it. But those individuals who really have difficulty with eye contact often are making a silent statement about their own relationship and their own issues of self-worth and self-esteem. And so if we are healthy, vibrant, empowered persons, and if we see others as vibrant and empowered persons, or if we see them as weaker and lacking in that empowerment, but we can give them that sustaining strength by making that connection. This eye contact is a big issue. One of the things that I tell business groups so often, and especially managers and executives, because it's very difficult, and it works, it's as true for housewives as it is for executives, but I'll say so often to executive staff, when someone comes to your office, put your pencil down. Put your pencil down, stop what you're doing, and look at the person. Because, of course, one of the things that in hierarchies that we tend to do, and of course in the executive realm, is that supervisors and those who are in charge often lord over other people, so they don't tend to have that connectiveness, that human aspect, and that mutual respect is totally lost. And so what we need to do is put down the pen or the pencil, put down the telephone, stop what we're doing, and give the person our attention. But a housewife needs to do the same when she's making a cake, or not a housewife, I shouldn't be so stereotypical. If a husband or a wife is making a cake and they're cooking in the kitchen, and one of the children come in, put the washcloth down, put the spoon down, stop doing what you're doing, and engage. And that really is a part of what can allow us to show respect for ourselves and for other people.
Yes, and children hit back at their parents in various ways. One being, parents always say, the moment I'm on the phone, my child acts up. And they do, because they know the parent is giving the full attention to the phone, so they do things to get attention, and that should give us a message. Very often it doesn't. It's what you just said. They don't respond to the child in that way. And the same thing would be true with when we have workmen working for us at our homes, just as if they were in a business place. We need to give them the full attention and the instructions and so they know what we want. Otherwise, there's all the misunderstanding in the world.
Yes. So often people will say, well, I'm too busy. I'm too busy to give full attention. I'm too busy to make eye contact. I'm too busy to stop and talk to my child. But in fact, if we look at the priorities of life, probably one of the highest that we should have is our relationships to each other as persons.
Yes.
And that really speaks to the divine and spiritual nature as well. And in the second half, we'll touch on that aspect as well. But it is really important for us to cultivate this ability to stop what we're doing, to reassess our priorities, and have the time to enjoy, to interact, to communicate, and to resolve conflicts and difficulties by being present in the moment. The other aspect that other than just communication, is being present in the moment when we are faced with a catastrophe or a life challenge. If we're sick, so often we've said this, if we're sick, we're sick.
Yeah.
If we have an issue of poverty or limit or lack in terms of our resources, then we have that situation. If we're depressed, if we're lonely, if we're hurt, if we're sad, all of those things are valid emotions and feelings, and we need to acknowledge them, but then the key is not to stay in them, to be present in the moment wherever we are, and if we're hurt, or if we are hurting, or if we are sad, or if we're sick, or if we're facing a financial challenge, be in that moment, be in that experience, and then not acknowledging the fact that that has power over us, but acknowledging the circumstance. And then we go into the mental and spiritual aspects of exercising the fact that we have authority, or we have the ability to deal effectively with where we are in the present. But we have to begin from the present.
We have to start right there. And this is true in prayer work too, because when people pray, it goes out as light. And then the light is diffused if their mind wanders. But if they keep their mind one-pointed, then it becomes very strong and bright, and the light is much brighter and goes out with strength and energy. And that would be an example of how it is all the time in our lives. But we see that light is formed.
And being present in that light, being present in that moment. And how many of us, when we're praying so often, or even when we're meditating, are not present in the moment?
Yes.
You know, and that lack of presence robs us, and it goes back to depleting our energy. And of course, as we started out talking about the aspects of energy, every one of us has the same amount of energy, but we expend it in different ways. So if I'm not as tired as you are, and I know you're not a tired person, we're vibrant, vital people because we don't waste a lot of time and effort and energy in negative aspects of life. But if we spend a lot of time out of the present, and if we spend our energy that way, then we are indeed going to be depleted, and we're going to be tired, we're going to be overworked, we're going to be burdened, and we're going to feel that we just don't have the time to do what we need to do. But in fact, we do have the time and the resources to do everything that we need to do in the now, in the present moment.
Yes, and we can tell ourselves and tell our audience too, when we feel fretful, then we know that we're diffusing our energy. And so then we need to just consciously focus and consciously keep our consciousness one-pointed. And work goes so much easier and so much more smoothly, and also much more enjoyably. That's a big point, isn't it?
Very big point. Yeah, life is meant to be enjoyable, and that doesn't mean we'll be happy all the time. But by being in the present moment, we can enjoy the present moment for the joys that it brings. And in those times that we have difficulties or challenges, we can deal effectively with them because we're there, we're confronting them, we're dealing with them in an objective and supportive way.
Yes, and people notoriously today in our country and probably everywhere eat while they're doing other things. They watch TV, they read, they do whatever. So the experts in food are telling us now that if we put our attention fully on what we're eating, it is far more beneficial to us. And I can see how it would be, can't you?
Absolutely. One of the things that we see coming from the East, and certainly some people in the West are doing it as well, is to have this spiritual aspect of all things and interaction, including the process of eating. And we know that our mind, body, and spirit, the triune part of us, have to be in balance. And so this aspect of simply blessing the food that we eat, being present when we're eating, but also if we're not by ourselves. Obviously, many of us eat alone at different times, but if there are people present, the positive aspect that there is in being present in the moment with those around us in the experience of eating the meal and conversing, sharing the food, sharing the presence of one another, and that cohesiveness brings us a wonderful aspect of life that a lot of us have lost. All of us who are older, can remember the time that our families were around the dining room.
Yes. Yeah. And that was a most enjoyable time. And we can remember those times with great pleasure. So we need to recapture some of the customs of older days.
Absolutely. And sitting around that dining room table at dinner as a family talking was very important. Yeah. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some information.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
Before the break, we were talking about the old values of family dining and really connecting with each other. I guess as we move into this last half of the program, I want to touch on some of the spiritual aspects of being present in the moment. And I think a good place to do that is, or a good way to segue into that, is to talk about the fact that we used to, as a nation, and we used to, as community and as family, spend a lot of time together. And it was because life was at a different pace, and certainly there was less to do, maybe. And maybe that's good, and maybe it's bad. But the fact is that we used to, in family units, have the ability to converse, whether it was having breakfast and dinner together or whether it was the evenings together. And now that seems to be less and less. And as we have broken up that ability, and of course we're not necessarily even talking about the traditional family. I mean, even people who were living together in community or living together in small groups were able to interact more effectively than they do today, don't you think?
Yes, of course. And even in boarding houses and places like that, people ate together, and there was this feeling of communion, community, and that's lacking today. And it's unfortunate that it's lacking. I think that's why so many people are so lonely. They feel that aloneness so deeply because they don't interact with others. And just talking on the telephone doesn't quite cut it, does it?
No. At least if we're talking on the telephone, we should be present in the moment as well. But so many of us spend time on the telephone and we're thinking about what it is we need to do when we get off the telephone. But a lot of it has to do with slowing our mind down, doesn't it?
Yes.
And centering ourselves. And one of the things that, of course, we do at the Angelus Fellowship, and you and I do in our counseling and dealing with people, in helping people, is to make them more aware of the spiritual aspect of their own nature and the spiritual aspect and value of those around them. In Unity, and which is a particular segment of New Thought that we're affiliated with, there is the saying, "I behold the Christ in you," or the old saying used to be, "The Christ in me salutes the Christ in you." And of course, for non-Christians, it could be the divinity or the divine or the God in me or the presence in me salutes the presence in you. So that universal philosophy that's so much a part of our faith tradition is about each of us understanding that we're physical beings, we're mental beings, and we're spiritual beings, and that those three parts of us need to acknowledge and salute and connect with those three parts of everyone we come in contact with. And when that happens, we are called to be in the present moment. And we are called out of ourselves and our aloneness and our loneliness into that connectiveness with other persons, and we respect other persons. And then we're able to put the pencil down or stop stirring and look at the people and acknowledge them in that present moment. And that is tremendously important.
Yes, of course. And there's a lot of talk today about self-esteem and validation. Well, how better and how really any other way can we validate someone or give them greater self-esteem than giving them full attention? And when we don't, then it's just the opposite.
That divine nature it should and has to just become a part of how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about those around us, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And you mentioned eye contact earlier. That's so important. It's worth mentioning a second time, to give full attention and to give eye contact and to truly listen when the other person is speaking. And it's so easy to just keep busy and keep going, but it's a matter of training oneself. Now, I know you do that extremely well at your desk. Have you always done that? Have you always been able to give people your full attention and stop whatever you're doing and give
Oh, absolutely.
attention?
Because my feeling is whatever I'm doing can't possibly be as important as what someone is coming to tell me, or can't be as important as that individual is. And so I've always practiced that principle. And the other principle that I've practiced really relates to the fact that there's plenty of time to do the other things. You know, and as you know, I don't have any problem if I don't have time to do something. I just don't do it, and it doesn't bother me, because the issue is where I need to be, where we all need to be, in setting the priorities in our life. And I think for those of us in the helping sciences and areas of life, whether we're counselors or whether we're clergy or whether we're just normal caring human beings, we ought to be able to prioritize our life in such a fashion that if someone comes in, that it's not an interruption or a distraction. Now, of course, we could do a whole program on time management, and we could take that to the extent where you get nothing done. But for the most part, we do need to stop what we're doing. We do need to acknowledge the people with us. And that's a part of being present in the moment. It's a part of acknowledging the value of those persons. It's a part of both spiritual and practical living. And of course, that's what we talk about so often, is making the spiritual practical, and making it all fit into our mind so that we have a healthy thought process and therefore have a healthy life.
Not only is it a courteous, good thing to do, but also we learn from those and from those contacts, and we learn things that we would not otherwise ever know. So it's for our own benefit as well as for the self-esteem and benefit of the other person.
That the ability to prioritize and to change our behavior is one of the wonderful gifts that we have as human beings. We can change the way we are anytime we want to if we just change our way of thinking and change our way of behaving. And I think it's really important for our viewers to understand that the things that we're talking about, if those are not the things that they are able to do at this point in time, all they have to do is change their behavior. And that sounds very flippant and easy, and we know that changing behavior is sometimes difficult, but we change behavior by identifying the problems that we have and by resolving not to do them, and then through the practice of doing what it is we ought to do rather than that which we ought not to do. And so being in the present moment is part of what we ought to do.
Yeah. And it's easy. It's easy when we put our minds to that, and when it becomes a way of life, then we just naturally reach out to other people in that way. And it's so much more enjoyable and beneficial, and more gets done, more gets accomplished by everyone when that system is used.
And the other thing is we don't get so tired.
Yes.
And we don't use this old thing that you and I and everyone else has heard, I don't have enough time and I'm so tired. I don't have enough time and I'm so tired. Isn't it a shame that we don't have enough time and we're tired when we go back to that issue that we all have the same amount of time in a day. Yeah. We all have the same amount of energy. I'm not talking about physical stamina. I'm talking about internal fortitude and energy to deal with the challenges of life. And in fact, we do have all of the energy that we need. We just need to stop wasting it. And we need to connect, really, as we always say, and as we come to the kind of the end of the program, the importance of acknowledging the spiritual aspect of ourself and the spiritual aspect of those around us. Spirit is everything, isn't it?
Yes, and it gives us a lift, a definite lift, when we just do our deep breathing, even if it's just 2 deep breaths, and attune ourselves to the divine. And when we do that, it gives us added energy that's noticeable, and at the end of the day, as you just said, we're not as tired because we're keeping ourselves reinvested with ever new and fresh energy.
And we can do that by simply being present in the moment and by giving up the time in the past and giving up the concerns of the future. And of course, we have to think about certain plans for the future. We have to think about it a little bit, but we don't have to think about it all the time.
Yes, we don't let our minds wander. When we do it, we do it. The ideal is to do it deliberately. And if we're planning, we're planning. But if we're wool gathering and mind wandering, that's a different thing entirely. And we know the difference. And I would challenge our viewers to just be aware of their day and their nights and for their hours and their moments, and see how they're squandering time and how they're just sending their energy out in all directions, or when they keep the energy concentrated. And if we keep our energy concentrated, we get ever so much more accomplished. So I wish we could hear from them in some way to see what success they've had, because I know it will make a big difference in everyone's life who practices that.
And as we practice that, we really, instead of depleting our energy, we get more energy, don't we?
Exactly.
And so we're able to do more. And so many people, we all know people who we'd say, well, we just don't understand how they're able to do all of that,
Yes.
how they're able to do it and keep it all together, and how they're able to do it through a very healthy process of understanding the priorities of life and by being present in the moment and dealing with whatever the present brings. And a lot of times we're not in the present moment because we want to run away and we don't want to deal with what's in the present. And one of the wonderful things about metaphysical New Thought philosophy is that it encourages us to be able to deal with the challenges, with the changes and the circumstances in our lives in a positive and affirmative way. It allows us to be where we are. And if we're not where we want to be, and if life isn't the way we want it to be, then we can change our way of thinking, we can change our way of behaving, we can change our way of living. And in doing that, we can move from where we are to where we need to be. And we can do it with ease and with grace and with strength and with power and without getting exhausted and without being confused all the time.
Exactly, and we do it, and we empower ourselves in that way, as well as empowering others. And as we empower ourselves, then our life is far more enjoyable. And one way of doing that, of empowering ourselves again, is just through attuning ourselves to the divine and taking deep breaths. It sounds so superfluous, but it works, doesn't it?
It works. It's a simple methodology. It is a physical exercise. It's a spiritual exercise. It's a mental exercise. And it's just like out with the old and in with the new. And we can also remember the things that our mothers used to say to us when they were angry, and they would say, "Look at me."
Yes.
And they said that for a good reason, because they wanted us to make connection.
Right.
And by making connection, good and wonderful things happened. During this time, Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you ideas and concepts of confident living, talking about being present in the now, and we hope that this information has been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. You will experience the musical talents of Ms. Denise Dumeyer. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.